We speak. Our words. We listen.
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 Spectrum Voices Conversations is an autistic radio production. It's possible because of Autistic Association, the wholly autistic charity created by autistic people for the purpose of engaging in conversations with professionals and placing a positive alternative to some of the narratives about autism. Sarah Nuttall has so many fingers and so many pies. Where should we be starting the conversation with you, Sarah?
At the start of my conversation is my late diagnosis. So I was diagnosed 4 years ago at the start of lockdown with a telephone call saying, oh yes, the difficulties that you've had are due to the fact that you're autistic. And then the phone was put down. I wasn't given any post-diagnosis support. I had to then start to process and assimilate this new idea. I started to read, and I just continued to read, and I haven't stopped reading about autism. As a result, I have been studying for a PhD, looking specifically at how autism presents differently in women, girls, and other marginalised genders. I'm about to do some research looking at autistic student teachers and whether their needs are met and how they might be met.
That's an immediate parallel. What we did with it slightly differs. You describe through a telephone conversation being given a piece of information about yourself. I experienced exactly the same thing. In the first few weeks of lockdown, I received my late diagnosis too.
Ah.
Exactly the same situation. There was not going to be any follow-up. I agreed to being diagnosed, having realised that I was autistic the previous year, self-diagnosed, self-identifying, whatever you want to say. I was happy with that. But there seemed an advantage in getting diagnosis because somebody was going to have a support mechanism. There was going to be some follow-up. And neither of us received that, did we?
No, not at all.
And that led you into research. That's
Yes.
Quite a bold step.
Yeah. I started doing an online free course by the Open University. Quite interesting. And started reading a mixture of books, some of them memoirs and autobiographies by autistic women. That led me to academic papers. I haven't stopped reading, and I love it. It's my new special interest.
Special interest. That's a lot of autistic people are trying to get away from that phrase. Let's call it a passion, shall we?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, unfortunately, there is a lot of deficit language around these things. Yes, but it is an absolute passion of mine.
I became aware of you through social media, not somewhere I spend a lot of time. There was an article recently published in a broadsheet newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, and then picked up by the tabloids. I thought what you wrote was much more considered than the general keyboard warrior stuff. What made you particularly take up that article?
I get extremely saddened by the way that autism is portrayed, particularly in the media. Autism myths, if you like, become accepted by society as a whole. I was trying to process how it is that these myths are accepted as science, in inverted commas. The media like to run with a story that is sensational, that has an extreme to it. There's also, sadly, this idea that autism is something that should be identified and cured, which I find absolutely horrific. This idea that autism can be reversed or cured, which I completely disagree with.
Was it because you are a researcher looking at something that has been purported or described as research? Was it the fact that you are a researcher that made you react in some way?
Absolutely, because when I read the paper, my researcher head immediately kicked in. A critical researcher looking at how this research had been approached. I thought of how badly the research had been conducted in terms of ethics, in terms of using a single study, making correlations into possible causations, and even things like blaming vaccinations. That myth, 1998, Andrew Wakefield, has been completely debunked.
I too read the paper, and it didn't feel like a scientific paper at all to me. In fact, the publishers made it clear that it was not carried out using the scientific method. That's the last thing people read. That's in the footnotes.
Yeah.
The information that's put out and published gets picked up by a national newspaper. What was it about the way they did that stuck with you?
It's the sensationalizing of these sorts of things around autism, and the fact that they pick just that single paper. Now, there are lots of actually autistic researchers out there who are doing research into autism. However, their research is very rarely cited. There's this idea to have a sensationalist report, that we'd like to think that autism is something that could be easily defined, easily cured, easily treated. This is the type of paper or article that is picked up on. Lots of autistic researchers out there who are doing some good work to support the autistic community.
This subjective report on one case of twins, what you're saying about which research, which study, which report gets the attention by the media is interesting to me, and I'm putting forward a possibility, and follow the money. There is one group of people that, if a report like the twin study that was put out there has a beneficiary, it's going to be two industries. The industry that's based on nutrition and probiotics as cures for autism, and applied behaviour analysis, because both of those things are mentioned as able to cure autism.
Absolutely. I do agree that there is a financial or economic agenda going on here. We know, for instance, particularly in the USA, that ABA, that's applied behavioural analysis, generates big bucks as the go-to intervention for autism in the States. Equally, certain pharmaceutical treatments or nutritional supplements make lots of money. And if you can convince people that there is a problem and a solution that will cost you money, then money can be made from that solution. So I agree.
There's an issue here in the UK, and that's that when I speak with people from the UK Society of Behaviour Analysts and when I speak to the Irish Society of Behaviour Analysts, I'm speaking to people on the board at high levels. And I ask them, why have they not put some kind of counter-argument? Why have they not requested some kind of clarification from the media? And I get answers. I get answers that say, yes, we probably should do that, or yes, I hear you, I take your point. And hopefully they will. But they have taken advantage from the article already, because the Telegraph has a readership in the middle income bracket who are able to search around and look for solutions for their child. Jocasta or Rupert has a parent reading the Telegraph, and the parent is influenced. It looks to me as though we have a slight double standard here. We have an organisation that is saying to me, at the best quality of the improvement of behaviourism and its application to autistic people, there's a change. But they still take advantage of the misinformation. Is that fair?
Yes, I think so. And I think the point that you made about it being the Telegraph that ran with this originally fits in with that. Unfortunately, this idea that being autistic is a bad thing and therefore having an autistic child is a bad thing, that's where it all starts. And very often at diagnosis, I still now encounter parents who say that the clinicians said to them, "I am very sorry, but your child is autistic." Or, "Unfortunately, your child will not be able to do X, Y, and Z in the future," which is often incorrect anyway. But there's this starting point that autism is a bad thing. And as a result of that, I think that parents who read these types of articles often then feel a sense of anger, guilt, and shame that they have an autistic child, and that this type of article continues this idea that autism is a bad thing, and that receiving an autism diagnosis for your child is a negative diagnosis.
Because it looks as though there is a program that offers a cure through ABA and through nutritional supplementation.
Yes. And as you pointed out, particularly the privileged parents who are middle class and have a certain level of income But it's often easier to accept a proposed external factor, such as vaccines, for example, in the late 90s, because that's something that they can do something about. So if you set up this solution that autism is a problem and here is a possible cure, for those people who are privileged enough to have the money to put into it, then yes, those parents will go out and try almost everything to try to deal with what has been sold to them as a problem.
I have a long-term conversation going on here with a profession that deserves respect for being able to change. Behaviorism and applied behaviour analysis is in flux. It's in flux in research, it's in flux in methods of practice. There are big changes going forward in behaviour analysis. How far it goes down the food chain, I don't know. But I think we have to help them to make what they say become their behaviour. Because the behaviour of behaviour analysis, if we think of the profession as one person, the behaviour exhibited does not match the words of those who wish to improve their profession. And the simplest behaviour would be for them to counteract these kind of wild reports taken up by reporters who do not have a background in science. Is that fair?
I think so. I think there is always a lag between what we appear to learn and what we put into place. Over the decades, I think science around autism inevitably has progressed, and we get these corrections, but often that can take decades for those corrections to be implemented. For example, originally autism was seen as a form of mental retardation and schizophrenia. We then were told by the likes of Asperger and Kanner that autism is a male presentation. Later we were told that it's caused by refrigerator mothers, by Bettelheim, and that was taken up by Kanner. In the 50s, we were told that autistic people have no theory of mind and lack empathy via Baron Cohen and his collaborators, or that autism was caused by vaccination. It has taken decades between each of those. It's taken decades, firstly, for those ideas and concepts to be turned over, accepted as turned over, and then finally put out into the public domain. I think this probably is something that happens with medical science generally, but appears to be happening particularly with autism. So we have to wonder, therefore, what is the agenda behind this huge lag? And as we've suggested, it is perhaps an economic one. It's sad and ironic that behaviour analysts themselves aren't prepared to look at their own behaviour around these topics, how autism is seen by the media.
I think they are. I think I'm meeting very intelligent people here on Autistic Radio in the big conversation around autism. I think that I'm impressed by the level of engagement with all of those things that you have just described on an intellectual level. I will be able to produce podcast after podcast where progressive, forward-thinking behaviourists come to explain that things can be done differently, that they are doing things differently in their place, in their sphere, in their school, in their situation. But the behaviour of the group has a duplicity in it that I can't see them seeing immediately, and we have to help them to see it.
It'll be important for folks following the progress to keep lag in mind, because not to think that they're going to find in every local service who might be doing behaviour a suddenly perfectly corrected thing, matching the most reformed and revised of the leading talk in that sphere. That's just the same as we get in education or in ordinary autism services. There's a lot of lag in those as well. At child psychiatry, they have all these service things where there's theories and ordinary people far below them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because we're looking at different sorts of levels here. We've got the academic side of things and what's accepted there, and then we've got the practitioners on the ground. And I think it's very heartening that there are lots of progressive behaviourists out there, particularly in schools. I think that's fantastic, and that's what we need. But it's making a connection between the academic and the work that's being done on the ground, and it's valuing and validating the work that's being done by progressive behaviourists. We need to be able to do that, and we need forums like this to be able to come together, because there is always power in numbers. And the more we're able to network and share and then feed back, perhaps to academia, perhaps the more we are going to advance the current situation.
So maybe part of what we're doing here is enabling the behaviourists who are at the cutting edge reach out to other behaviourists and describe their practice in different terms alongside us. We're enabling and supporting behaviourists within their own community as Autistic Radio, as the conversation develops. We have invited them to come and talk to us about behaviourism, and now we've ended up in a situation where we're encouraging the best practice of behaviourism as an alternative to the things that we as autistic people have had objection to in the past. Am I going to be safe doing that when there are so many keyboard warriors and self-appointed group advocates? What's going to be the reaction as more and more autistic people listen to the podcast, instead of what I think at the moment is the majority of people who are listening to this conversation are the behaviourists themselves?
I think that's a very interesting question. First of all, the idea of what an expert is has changed over the years, and it is recognised that autistic people themselves are experts in their own lives.
I want to
In
interrupt
terms,
you. I want to
yeah,
interrupt you. I want to say there's no experts.
Okay.
The idea of an expert is not appropriate when we're talking about people and human beings and the way they live their lives, because expertise is about really specific possible things, and the field of autism is always an inquiry, and you can't be an expert in an inquiry. We can use the term in other ways, but I just want to point out the feeling that there are no experts here. Even the people who have been in the field for such a long time come to talk to me and they say, yeah, I'm called an expert, but the thing I know now is how little I know.
I think that was the point that I was making, actually. I was about to say that autistic people are experts in their own lived experiences, and we can't take that away from them. They're the ones that know how they possibly experience life. And I think that's the point I was trying to make, that people that we consider or have previously considered to be experts are beginning to realise that they're not. And I think that there is, as you know, quite a range of responses from the autistic community with regards to things like ABA and behavioural interventions. And for example, Temple Grandin is a strong advocate for behavioural interventions, that as a child, there are lots of things that she recognises really helped her. As an autistic writer, Tito Mukhopadhyay, says that if it hadn't been for his mother's interventions when he was a child, he doesn't feel that he would have reached the stage he is at now in being able to express himself. However, there are members of the autistic community who have had a very difficult and traumatic experiences with applied behavioural analysis, and as a result are really quite against these things. There will be a range of responses to what you're suggesting and what you're trying to advocate for.
I'm advocating for a conversation. I'm advocating for what you described as an open forum. I'm advocating for empathy created between those of us who are autistic and those people who want to reach out and create a career that they think is valuable to society by working with us. I'm advocating not for a position, but for the conversation.
Which I think is fantastic. Those conversations need to take place, and I think everybody needs to be involved in those conversations. Autistic people are given a voice, and autistic researchers are given a voice. Unfortunately, at the moment, those who hold the power are the ones that are given the voices. The current head of autism studies at Cambridge is often cited over and above other researchers. Having that open forum will hopefully allow for discussion and give a space for all voices to be heard.
Yeah, my impression of Cambridge University is it's got itself in a bit of a mess. There's a whole lot of power politics going on there that's detrimental to the institution itself as well as us. But there we go. Maybe we can go around that. Maybe if those that take the power and take the platform can be swerved around, that we can take a different route around them and we can go direct to the profession by speaking directly to them, then they will emerge as voices instead. That's what we can do here, I think.
I think that's a possibility. I do like to see research done by people who are autistic themselves. I do know that there are lots of autistic behavioural analysis practitioners out there, and that's fantastic. I think often as autistic people, because we want to understand our own behaviours and understand the behaviours of non-autistic people in society, we are drawn to professions, counselling, psychology, behaviour analysis. There are plenty of autistic people out there who work in those spheres. Allowing autistic people to have a voice is the most important thing for me.
Now, say including the voice of the kid in the middle of a situation, making choices, being given any choices, just as much as the voice of the autistic professional who's had enough of a less bumpy life to have got into a profession.
Yes, I think you're right. And there continues to be this idea that parents, practitioners, know better than the child. Adults have got responsibilities. It's really important that autistic children are listened to and that parents and practitioners work with them with their specific needs, differences, passions. I think that's really important too.
You're describing it as the need for two-way communication from the child to the parent, from the parent to the professional, from the professional to the child. All of those conversations need to be two-way. My experience leads me to believe that many professionals feel that it is a one-way conversation. So here we are. I don't want to challenge anyone. I want to invite people. I want to invite people with gradually more and more in-depth conversations here on Autistic Radio, especially in the conversation ABA, PBS, Autism, the big conversation. Because for me, as an autistic man in the UK, behaviourism is the hot topic, the important topic for me. Sarah, I think if people had come across you and you could only have expressed yourself through a paragraph on social media, they would have been able to walk away from your words. But because you've been here and you've spoken in depth and because you've spoken at length, I believe that there's the possibility that there will be more impact from what you say. Does that feel right to you?
I think that would be great. Some people prefer to hear a person speak, and that is more intimate and therefore profound. It's very easy in a busy world to skim read, think you've got the gist of something, Personally, as an autistic person who also has ADHD, I love listening to podcasts whilst I'm doing other things. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to have a voice myself. Thank you.
Well, I hope you're going to take advantage of this opportunity on many further occasions as you go through your research. Join us again here on Autistic Radio for ABA, PBS, Autism, the Big Conversation. Thank you to everyone who's taken part today. Thank you to Morris and Harry and Sarah and those people who I can see in the background sending me emails right now and texting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Autistic Radio is personal and it's informal, which means that those taking part speak only for themselves. If they mention an organisation that they work for or they're a member of, they're not speaking on behalf of that organisation. We shouldn't take any implication from that. It's also the case that people's opinions change over time. So while this recording is there forever, people change.